Hey everyone, and welcome to Travel Through Stories. My name is Sean, and today I want to talk about Annie Ernaux's novel Happening, translated from the French by Tanya Leslie and published by Seven Stories Press. Happening came out in French in 2000 and was quickly translated into English, though this edition from Seven Stories Press came out in 2019. This is actually the first I've read of Annie Ernaux. She's been on my radar for years, but recently Seven Stories Press had a lovely sale on their website, so I went and picked up 3 different books by her. And I actually read all 3 of them in a single weekend. I read 2 of them back to back without even standing up. I read Happening and Simple Passion back to back. There was just something about when I read Happening and I finished it that I just couldn't not pick up the next one right away. There's something about Annie Ernaux's writing that is just so raw and just so open that I couldn't not spend the rest of my day with her. But for those of you who may not be familiar with Annie Ernaux, she's been pretty active and publishing for about 50 years. And she was brought to the Anglophone world actually by Seven Stories Press. She's actually one of the 7 founding authors. And Ernaux has won a ton of awards. I mean, she's pretty much won every award in France over her career, but perhaps more famously in the Anglophone world. In 2019, she was shortlisted for the Booker International Prize. She's primarily known for writing these sorts of memoirs in which she excavates her own life and probes at her own memories and reworks them, perhaps in an attempt at healing or something like that. But it isn't just for personal gain that she writes these kinds of books. She's explicitly political in her examination of her own womanhood, and especially in Happening, in what it was like being a 20-something-year-old in the 1960s in France. And that's exactly what Happening is about. Happening is the product of Annie Ernaux in her 50s or 60s or something like that, going back and writing about this abortion that she had when she was 23 years old. She was a student. She explains pretty early on why she decided to finally write about this event in her life. And she writes, "I want to become immersed in that part of my life once again and learn what can be found there. This investigation must be seen in the context of a narrative, the only genre able to transcribe an event that was nothing but time flowing inside and outside of me. The diary and the engagement books I kept back then will provide the necessary dates and evidence to establish what happened. Above all, I shall endeavor to revisit every single image until I feel I have physically bonded with it, until a few words spring forth, of which I can say, yes, that's it. I shall try to conjure up each of the sentences engraved in my memory, which were either so unbearable or so comforting to me at the time that the mere thought of them today engulfs me in a wave of horror or sweetness. The fact that my personal experience of abortion, i.e. clandestinity, is a thing of the past does not seem a good enough a reason to dismiss it. Paradoxically, when a new law abolishing discrimination is passed, former victims tend to remain silent on the grounds that now it's all over. So what went on before is surrounded by the same veil of secrecy as before. Today, abortion is no longer outlawed, and this is precisely why I can afford to steer clear of the social views and inevitably stark formulas of the rebel 70s, abuse against women, and face the reality of this unforgettable event." So the political impetus is quite clear in that passage, but she also expresses this idea that she wants to force herself to engage with this memory, quote, until I feel I have physically bonded with it. She wants to engulf herself in this terrible and traumatic memory, and this idea of doing this through writing is really quite interesting to me, and I'll come back to it. Ernaux kept a diary that she continually refers back to in this book, and the diary acts as the kind of primary text of this event. But we see her perform this sort of exegesis on this diary, like biblical scholars who will take a single line from Exodus and expand upon it and analyze it and use it as a jumping off point. Annie Ernaux takes her old diary from when she was 23 years old and plunges into it, expanding it and recreating it and restaging all of those memories that it references. And she even quotes from the diary directly a few times. And there's this really interesting juxtaposition between the terse diary entries that she transcribes and with the much longer and much more emotionally dense scenes that she depicts. Her redepictions of these scenes are much longer and more full, obviously. But it really kind of begs the question, which one is true? Which one is more real? Is the diary that's written the day that the event occurred more credible? Or is the recreation of these events 30 odd years later when Ernaux's in her 50s, is that one more real? And I should be careful with my words here because I don't really care that much to get into the question of which is more real necessarily, as that seems to be both a fool's errand and clearly beside the point. But I'm interested in how she uses writing as a means to recreate and revise her own memories, writing as a process of processing. It seems to me not too dissimilar to what a lot of writers who write in the genre that we might call autofiction do, right? Karl Knausgård, Daša Drndić, who doesn't really do autofiction, but is kind of autofictional in some ways. Ricardo Piglia, Kjersti Skomsvold, Vigdis Hjorth, Boström Knausgård, etc. What a lot of these authors are doing are probing their own memories and their own lives and expanding upon them. Again, kind of performing some sort of exegesis of their own lives and their own memories and delving into them and just seeing what they find. And what's so interesting about Happening is how this narrative creates a life of its own, a life that Ernaux isn't fully in control of. She writes at one point that, "I feel that this narrative is dragging me along in a direction I have not chosen, proceeding along the inescapable road of fatality. I must resist the urge to rush through these days and weeks and attempt to convey the unbearable sluggishness of that period, as well as the feeling of numbness that characterizes dreams, resorting to all the means at my disposal. Attention to detail, use of the descriptive past tense, analysis of events." So this desire to control not only her memories, but the narrative of her memories and sort of tame them in a way seems to be what Ernaux, or the narrator, there's clearly a difference between Ernaux the author and Ernaux the narrator, of course. But this desire to control or tame her memories is what she's trying and failing in a way, I guess, to do. She does create order out of the chaos of these memories in this book, but at the same time, the memories themselves remain ones of chaos. And part of the problem for our narrator is that the thing she's talking about is this action that is so difficult to speak about. Abortion is something that almost everyone has a strong and unwaverable opinion on, but it's also one of those things that are incredibly difficult to talk about. And we very rarely talk about individual experiences. Obviously, as a man, my experience is very different than others, but I find that the social and political discourse on abortion is always rooted in the vague and philosophically moralizing rather than on the personal and psychological and even social. And of course, this dialogue was very different in the 1960s when this book takes place, as it was completely illegal everywhere. Doctors could literally be arrested for discussing the option of abortion with a patient, never mind actually doing the procedure. That is, you literally couldn't talk about it. Ernaux notes this at one point after she just speaks to a doctor about getting some sort of procedure done. She just writes, "Neither of us had mentioned the word abortion, not even once. This thing had no place in language." Of course, though, this book is made up of language, and therefore, by even writing this book, Ernaux is subverting this very notion. It's brilliant. But the subject matter is difficult, and Ernaux does not mince words. This book describes the process of finding a doctor to do the procedure, and the procedure itself in, again, very raw and open manner. It can be difficult to read, but I think that's the point. And Ernaux refuses to apologize for this difficulty. She writes, "I realize this account may exacerbate or repel some readers. It may also be branded as distasteful. I believe that any experience, whatever its nature, has the inalienable right to be chronicled. There is no such thing as a lesser truth. Moreover, if I had failed to go through with this undertaking, I would be guilty of silencing the lives of women and condoning a world governed by male supremacy." Ernaux isn't going to be complicit. She's going to speak out. She forcibly creates a place in language for this topic of abortion. So while she notes that abortion has no place in language, she at the same time is forcibly creating a place in language for the discussion around abortion. And she forces us to consider why this topic that so many people have firsthand experience of and so many people have to deal with, why it's so difficult to talk about. She writes, as was often the case, you couldn't tell whether abortion was banned because it was wrong or wrong because it was banned. People judged according to the law. They didn't judge the law. So in the book, she goes through this traumatic experience. And of course, she can't really talk to anyone about it. It's too taboo and illegal in some cases. So she represses it for 30 odd years until she writes this book. At the end of the book, she summarizes this experience and explains why she, at long last, chose to relive this experience and rewrite it. She writes, "I have finished putting into words what I consider to be an extreme human experience, bearing on life and death, time, law, ethics, and taboo, an experience that sweeps through the body. I have rid myself of the only feeling of guilt in connection with this event. The fact that it happened to me, and I had done nothing about it, a sort of discarded present, among all the social and psychological reasons that may account for my past, of one I am certain, these things happened to me so that I might recount them. Maybe the true purpose of my life is for my body, my sensations, and my thoughts to become writing. In other words, something intelligible and universal, causing my existence to merge into the lives and heads of other people." Because it's a process of understanding, the process of writing and reading is a process of healing. I think this book is just brilliant in so many different ways, and it's incredibly short. It's less than 100 pages. I'm interested to hear what others think of Annie Ernaux. I know that her A Girl Story and The Years are a bit more popular, but I was just so struck by Happening, and I don't see that many people online talking about it. I think most people are talking about The Years and A Girl Story, and so I decided I would perhaps try to add to the conversation around Annie Ernaux by talking about Happening, because I just thought it was so powerful and such a great book. Anyways, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.